All right, guys, welcome into another episode of AL.com Recruiting. I'm your host, Simone Eli, alongside Ben Thomas, Patrick Greenfield behind the scenes producing the show. The big name to get to today is Jeremiah Alexander. It's been a huge week for Alabama. People throughout the entire state are very, very excited that the number one recruit in the state for the class of 22 has rejoined the Tide's 22 class. Ben, there was a time where Jeremiah Alexander was committed to Alabama. He decommitted, I think it was before last season. He said it was to kind of focus on football, but you also have to imagine that he was kind of weighing his options. Of course, Clemson was in the mix as well.
Yeah, and, hopefully the viewers will stay tuned. We have Jeremiah coming up talking about his reasons for that stuff. But, I just think, Simone, it was a good time for him. He was, in the heat of a state championship race with Thompson.
Yep.
He said he wanted to kind of just take a break. And, of course, we were in the middle of a 15-month pandemic halted face-to-face recruiting session. So you can't blame, I don't think, any of these guys for just taking their time, wait until they could get out there and see what was what, and that's what Jeremiah did. And so, if you look at the whole week from our last show until now, it's maybe a little bit slower because we didn't have as many commitments. But when you got the number one guy in the state committing, that's big time, obviously.
Yeah, no doubt. And we had the opportunity to speak with Jeremiah at the Birmingham Media Days this week on his decision to rejoin the Tide class. Here's what he had to say.
Because the amount of times I've been up there is really a family atmosphere, and I feel like if every coach was to leave the University of Alabama, that I'll still be home and feel comfortable. Got to fall in love with the school and not the coaches.
Final two, Alabama and Clemson.
Yes,
what were the differences and what stood out?
Clemson, I love Clemson. Coach Bates, he was a great guy. I still talk to him today, but Bama, it's just different, at home atmosphere. Nothing like playing at home in a school that I've always looked at growing up. Looking at the University of Alabama, so.
You originally committed to Alabama and then reopened your recruiting.
Yes, sir.
Why?
Just so I can focus on my team. I was young and I just felt like it was too much pressure, but now going into my senior year, I feel like I made the right decision.
All right. So at the end of the day, he felt more at home. And I think that, Ben, we see that a lot, especially with these upper echelon recruits that choose Alabama. It's a team that they've been watching for so long, especially these kind of younger guys right now. All they have ever really known is Nick Saban at Alabama. So you go on campus, it's somewhere you're familiar. And I'm not really surprised by this decision by him.
Yeah, no, I think most people probably thought that he was going to go back to Alabama eventually. I don't know that there was any panic in the Alabama staff or anybody else when he decommitted.
Yeah.
But I think he just wanted time. His mom's a big Alabama fan. He committed on her birthday. We had talked about a couple of times, Simone, that he was talking about committing at the All-Star game late this year or beginning of next year, whenever that is. And he had kind of gradually pushed that back and said could be any time. And I think he was just ready. He went in June to Alabama. He'd been there several times. He'd been to Clemson. He'd been to UCF. He went to Georgia. So I think, he just thought it was time. He wants to probably focus on his senior season. And he's got a chance to review everything. And, I don't think we'll see a decommitment again.
No, I definitely think he is set on Alabama 100%. And I think one thing, Ben, for him was being able to go on campus. He had been to Alabama, of course, but he was able to visit Clemson as well. We had the opportunity to ask Jeremiah how much that kind of played a role in his decision-making ultimately to choose the Tide to rejoin that 22 class. Here's what he had to say.
Valuable because, that's a big decision. I feel bad for the class 21 players because some of them didn't get to take visits and stuff like that, but it was a big role in the process and the whole reason I committed.
What's left for you to accomplish in high school?
Definitely got a 3P with my guys and just be the best player and teammate that I can be. I have a good support system at home and coming up here every day working out with my teammates and Coach Freeman and coaching staff, so everyone's support is it's very good.
So, again, just being able to be on campus, visit with those coaches. And he had nothing negative to say about Clemson. I really think this was a difficult decision for him between those two top schools, two schools that we've seen win a lot of national championships lately. But ultimately, it's Alabama for Jeremiah. And a lot of that was Saban and just being able to visit campus and it feeling like home, Ben.
Yeah, we talked about that he took a trip to UCF, but that was mainly Trey Williams is now at UCF. He was the former Auburn player, was on the Thompson staff last year. I think that was a key in getting not only Jeremiah but Peter Woods and some of those other Thompson guys down there. But it's interesting. Randy Kennedy, who was one of our recruiting analysts here on AL.com, heard him talking yesterday about there aren't a whole lot of programs right now, frankly, in the nation that can beat Alabama recruiting wise on a kid. Two of them were involved in this. Clemson and Georgia, I think, have that possibility. But when it came down to it, Alabama was there. It's close to home. Obviously there's a lot of championship rings and NFL history that Coach Saban can show kids. And that's hard to ignore when you're a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid like these guys.
Yeah, it definitely is. So Jeremiah is the fourth, if I have my numbers right, the fourth in-state recruit to commit to Alabama. Manuel Henderson, the running back, Antonio Kite just committed, and Robert Woodyard down here, the linebacker down in the Mobile area. He's been a part of this recruiting class for 22 for Alabama for quite a while. So Alabama really doing some damage when it comes to getting the big-time names here in the state, Ben.
Yeah, obviously Antonio Kite, other than Jeremiah, was the latest. He committed, I think, on the 4th of July or the 4th of July weekend. We talked about him last week. Good get at defensive back. Obviously, all great basketball player as well. Yeah. I think Robert Woodyard is an interesting case. We haven't talked about him a lot. He's right here in our backyard, Simone. You and I being down here in Mobile, and actually, we will get a chance to see him on Friday at the Mobile County Media Days. Yeah. So I'm interested to talk to him because he's just been kind of quiet. He committed more than a year ago to Alabama, and he's not a guy that's on Twitter a lot. He's a linebacker. He looks really good when I've seen him on 7-on-7, but I'm just interested to talk to him and talk about his recruiting and where he is in that for a good Williamson team, because he's been, of those four guys, he's been by far committed the longest.
Yeah, we're getting a bunch of comments. Michael Lee here, we appreciate you watching and all the comments that you're bringing in. And he has brought up a couple of Hewitt-Trussville guys. He asked, why did Riley Quicks end up choosing baseball over football? Ben, we've discussed that a couple times on the show already, and we really think the big part of that was his body and what kind of you go through when it comes to baseball versus football. But I know you have some insight when it comes to why he chose that.
Yeah, I mean, a good question by Michael. I appreciate everybody watching and commenting. We did talk about that last week. Riley, it's just an interesting contrast because you see guys who play football and baseball both all the time, but very rarely do you see an offensive lineman who is a pitcher. Yeah. This is Riley Quick was the Class 7A. We're not, he's just not an ordinary pitcher. He was the Class 7A pitcher of the year. Yeah. In the state of Alabama. He was 9-2 with 2 saves, I think, and so he has a chance to get drafted, Simone, next summer. We just finished the Major League Baseball draft for this summer. Next summer, it's very possible that Riley Quick is drafted, but I think the comparison there, and he was trending, I think after this baseball season, he was trending more toward baseball over football. It's just almost impossible on the SEC level to be an offensive lineman and a pitcher in both sports, because you're just not going to, your weight's not going to fluctuate that much. Sure. I mean, if you're an offensive lineman in the SEC, you're going to need to be 300 pounds or over for the most part. And as a pitcher, I don't think most people want to be 300 pounds or over. Yeah. So I think that's why he didn't play both. And I think he just sees a better future in baseball. And like I said, he committed to Alabama recently. That was another 4th of July commitment to play baseball. But he's also a guy who, when it comes down to it, he could bypass college if he gets picked high enough in the Major League Baseball draft. So good question, Michael. I hope I answered that. But Riley Quick is going to be it's going to be a base. Now, I will mention, Simone, that he does plan to play football for Hewitt this fall. So he's not giving up his high school career, but he just will not play football when he gets to Alabama. At least that's what he says right now.
Yeah, another comment that we got from Michael, something we were just discussing right before we started the show, is the kid from Calera, Ben. You mentioned this right before we started, how significant of a decommitment this was. I know you have some more insight on Kobe.
Yeah, he's talking about Kobe Prentice, who's a wide receiver from Calera, who just a couple of weeks ago, Simone, committed to Maryland. But the thing about that was right after that, he camped at Alabama, and Alabama offered him. So I don't know when it'll happen, but, I think it's very likely that he becomes an Alabama commit in the near future. He loved it there. This is a guy that's really fast. I think he runs a 4.38 40, Simone. So he's a guy that Alabama, Nick Saban fell in love with him. He met with Nick Saban personally, and I think eventually we'll see him in this Alabama class as well.
Yeah, Patrick just mentioned bringing up that top 5. Ben, I know that you've released a lot of lists as of late. And we take a look at the top recruits that you do have for the class of 22. Who kind of sticks out to you on that list?
Well, obviously, Jeremiah's there. I think Traquan Fagans is now an interesting case. I mean, you look there at the top 4 guys who are committed there. Jeremiah, you mentioned 3 of them to Alabama. Jeremiah Alexander, Emmanuel Henderson. We've had his coach, Jim Bob Striplin, on the show before. We mentioned Woodyard. Shamar James from Faith Academy is now going to Florida. If you look at Traquan Fagans, is interesting. He's recently narrowed his list to 5. They are Alabama, Miami, Georgia, Oklahoma, South Carolina. Hearing a lot of Miami buzz about him. This is the 5-star defensive back who transferred from Oxford to Thompson High School along with his brothers. They have a football playing family, so I think he's the next one to keep an eye on. Curtis Perry from Park Crossing is an interesting. I'm not sure where he may go. He's got a lot of top offers. And Justice Finkley, we talked about him recently. He just recently narrowed his commitments or his list to Alabama, Texas, and Colorado. He's the really smart guy for Hewitt who wants to be a surgeon after his football career is over. So all those guys is interesting. I guess the next one, I'm kind of dragging on here, but the next one to keep an eye on may be Caden Story. He's supposed to commit August 1st. He is the Lynette defensive lineman, Auburn. A lot of people think he may end up at Auburn. So that'll be an interesting keep an eye on.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty interesting to see, if you're looking at this list, just how many of these guys are already committed to Alabama, how many could be committed to Alabama. I'm talking about Fagans, talk about Finkley. We know Alabama does really well in-state recruiting. We will see if that continues for the class of 22. So really good information there, Ben. We appreciate all that insight. Patrick Greenfield behind the scenes, bringing up all the graphics and highlights for us. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of AL.com Recruiting. We'll have much more next week as we progress through the month of July, Ben. You just never know what's going to happen when it comes to recruiting. It seems like things are really picking up.
Yeah, I do want to mention we did have another commitment last week. Clay Chalkful, wide receiver Marquise White committed to Tennessee over Louisville. So I wanted to mention him because he's obviously big time. He runs a 4.37 40. He had 12 touchdowns last year. So good commitment there too. A lot of talent in state.
Yeah. No doubt about it. A lot of talent in state, a lot of talent headed to the SEC. Alabama, of course. We'll see what Auburn can do. We'll discuss more of that next week on AL.com Recruiting. He's Ben Thomas, Patrick Greenfield behind the scenes. I'm Simone Eli. Everybody have a great rest of